Good afternoon, or should I say good morning, and happy holidays to everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I am your host today. My name is Liz Landry. I'm your KW Talent Community Leader. We are joined today by three amazing CV instructors. We've got Marian, Melanie, and John all coming to us, veterans on CV and caffeine. This is not their first rodeo, to impart all of their knowledge and wisdom and all of their fantastic things they have learned through years of KPA validations, interviews, practicing this themselves, teaching it to thousands, I would imagine, of KW associates at this point. And so we're going to hear from a leadership angle, we're going to hear from an agent angle, and we're going to get going. So today, what are we talking about? KPA validation best practices, right? When we look at the KPA, we absolutely owe it to anybody we run a KPA on, first and foremost, to validate that KPA. I see way too frequently that the KPA comes in, it might be a low match, and we just say, candidate out. So here's what I'm going to start with is just say, we absolutely owe it to them to validate it. They took the KPA. We owe it to sit down with them and take the time to see, A, is it accurate? And B, respect the relationship of interviewee and interviewer to fulfill that part of the process. Because while I find that 80% of the KPAs are pretty accurate, there's always those odd balls out, right, that happen. So before we were on here, before we went live, we were talking kind of about what we believe some of our best practices is. And Melanie, I'm going to start with you and jump there. And you talked about a panel that you and John were on, I think, at Family Reunion last year.
Yeah.
Onto the KPA validation best practices and the point that you were making on there with the personal reverse job fit report.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because first of all, hi everybody. Thanks for having me back, Liz. It's great to be here with my friends. I love our instructor team. This is such a game changer, this material. It is. And when you really understand it and embrace it and see that it's not overwhelming, it's really powerful. And John can speak more on this, but it's fascinating how many people are not even utilizing this great tool. So the panel that I facilitated there was really talking to team leaders and OPs and from a market center leadership perspective on the one for recruiting. And this could also be for teams that are recruiting team members. You know, a lot of people are like, I don't want to ask people to commit 45 minutes to 50 minutes of their lives for something I may or may not be moving forward with them on. And yet did you know that there's a shorter tool that takes 10 minutes that gives you a similar snapshot? It's not as thorough as the full one, but I think it's really powerful to know your tools that you have in this company. And literally, I was just last month teaching CV and Leverage Series in Charlotte for the Carolinas region. And, you know, like you started off, this is such just a piece of a process, right? Like the KPA is your book that it guides you through. But when you guys can master, whether you lead a team or you're recruiting, whatever you're doing, when you can master this little printout of amazing tool that we have, it's so powerful. And it's telling you, it's opening the door for conversations with people. And a lot of times the people that come to these trainings with us, it's like they realize they, didn't really do this. So the opportunity to like, who doesn't want to know more about themselves? Let's be real. Everybody loves to know about themselves. So what if you
I would say so. Everyone's curious, right? What does that piece of paper say about me?
Yeah, like tell me. So the fact I really like that you started with, you never not like have that conversation with them. Imagine somebody gives you 10 minutes for the fast one or 50 minutes of their life. They take that and then they never hear from you again.
That would be terrible. And I'll tell you, it happens all the time.
It does. Don't do that. Do not do that. And if you follow career visioning, like that is a no-no. You only send KPAs to people you actually want to have a conversation with, right? And even if it's a 5-minute conversation to like make sure verified that's who they are. So for recruiting though, you think of it from a recruiting perspective, and again, John can hop in on this, but think about, we're always looking for, number one, we want to understand people, because if you can't help them where they want to go, number one, how are you going to be be able to prescribe that and be that solution for them, whether they're on your team or hired for market centers. But if you don't take the time to know who you're talking to, like, so for me, it was always the next thing, like, well, I'm going to send you this thing, right? 17 years, recruited, probably 2,000 plus people to this company. Now I coach team leaders and all that. people want to learn about themselves. And when you really understand what a tool this is, it's just a next level of that conversation. And what you'll find, and we'll go deeper on it with my colleagues on here, is when you take that time, a lot of times when you go through that the full one as well, after you go through that experience, they're like, you know me better than the broker I've been working with for 15 years, or when I'm recruiting in India or whatever. Like, they're like, you know me better than my mother, right? Because it's the conversation around it. You don't have to be an expert at understanding the tool. The tool is there. You just need to really know how to work it, and it'll be a game changer for all the numbers. So John had some really interesting numbers he talked about at that panel at Family Reunion, if he'd like to share that.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing with the validation process is one, especially around recruiting, because you have two different versions, and I think they're really for two different purposes. One, I'm just trying, the personal report, I'm trying to get to know somebody for the most part. The second one, or the longer version, I'm looking to make a hire. And so I think knowing what purpose you're going in there for really is helpful, because sometimes I think we get judgmental when we're wanting to look to bring somebody in our organization, and we might be looking for particular things. And especially with the personal report on recruiting, it's more about relationship building than anything else, I think. Because ultimately, I want to get to know you, because if I don't know you, one, people do business with people they like, know, and trust. And this is going to be this is a great tool to allow me to start to get to know you, and then the questions that I ask and the conversation that we have from that elicits that likability and that trust, so that you then open up, and then I have the ability to make a recommendation to you on your business, or things that we can go from here. So I think that just knowing what purpose you're going in there for, is this a hire, is this, or is this a relationship building effort? Because for the most part, at least when it comes to recruiting, most of us just want to go in there and close fast without really building a relationship. And that's not where we start here at KW. It's all about the person. It's all about the relationship, and making sure that we have their best interests in mind. And we haven't earned the right to recruit you until we do that part of the process.
Yeah. So
right. Right.
I think that's such a good point, John, right? It's the difference of, am I trying to get to know you, right? Personal report, or am I trying to hire you into my business, right? And, as a brokerage, right, we have lots of teams, single agents, independent contractors that come into our world. We're not necessarily hiring them, right? They're in our world, they're a relationship. And that's where that personal report can come in really well. At the very beginning, we're talking to somebody, we want to get to know them, right? You might even do this with a co-broke agent that you're like, hey, I just want to know you better. We do deals all the time, our lender, our title reps, right? Like all of those people. Because as you said, Melanie, the personal report, we're only asking for about 15 minutes of their time. Yeah. And on the job fit report, the full KPA, we're really asking for almost an hour of their time on that. And the validation process is going to take longer. So that everyone knows kind of the differences, the core difference on those two. Not only is it the time that it takes to actually take the KPA, the big difference is your job fit report is going to have the thinking traits on it, along with the behavioral and the modifying traits. Your personal report is only going to have your modifying traits and your behavioral traits. And your personal report will not be overlaid with a position. It's right. Truly just getting to know the person, like John said. Your job fit report, I'm comparing a person that I'm getting to know with a role. And that makes a significant difference doing that, right? Because now we're looking at, if I'm going to hire this person, are they going to be good based on what we deem to be good in a majority of teams, right? Like it looks a little bit different from that standpoint. And I think that's such a great way to look at it. Am I getting to know you, or am I trying to hire you? Am I considering hiring?
Yeah,
it makes a big difference.
One, I'm definitely going to be very neutral when I'm doing a personal report, because it's just a kind of fact finding, where I think that sometimes when we're doing the job fit, I'm looking for specific things. And so the purpose and my mindset is completely different when I'm going into both of those.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that came out of that conversation is John, that we talked about is, remember, giving the prescription from that, knowing it's high sociability. And so different ways to lead gen and help set, create the prescription for them just from that short one, because you've built the rapport and now you have ways to like invite them to things that are going to be attractive to their personality style, right? And I think that was just an interesting way to look at it, because when you look at the numbers, they're very underutilized compared to the Big Daddy that I call the other one, which is the one that honestly I use for most of my major conversations that I have. But we forget that we have this little one that's at our fingertips to build that rapport.
Well, I think the biggest use of that little one is definitely for the team leader, right? When they're recruiting agents, they're not hiring them like salaried people that they have to make sure are going to be able to specifically fit, as Liz said, that role. They're looking to come into the general populace of the office, and we're really just looking, like John said, to get to know you. We just want to know you a little bit better, and to make sure that you're going to be a cultural fit, and to share with you what our culture is. It's a two-way street. And I think that's the biggest use that we have for that, is the team leader in recruiting, and not just the team leader of the market center, but the team leader of our teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had everybody in your office had one. You could go in and see a little KPA on every agent you work with, so you could like pull it up real quick if you have a consulting or something's going on, right? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Well, here's an offshoot validation best practice that I'll throw in there too, right? Like, this isn't actually part of the process, this one that I'm going to give you. One of the things that I like to do if I'm going to be validating a KPA, right? One, review it before you sit down with the candidate, right? Like that. I think that should go without saying, but I know I need to say it because I know it doesn't always happen. But two is refresh yourself on what I call that cheat sheet. It's usually around page 10 and 11 in the KPA job fit report, but it's that sheet that outlines every single trait and exactly what it means on the high end and on the low end, right? Review that. We tend to impart our own definitions on things on the KPA, right? People think that responsiveness naturally means if you're high responsiveness, you're going to get to a lead quick. That's not actually what that means. Might they? Sure, they might get to a lead quick, but that's not what that means. So I would say, for a best practice as well, and this is something that I do every time, and I study this thing for a living, right? Like, this is my bread and butter that I talk about on a regular basis, and I still do this before validating, is just go through that cheat sheet and remind myself how the KPA defines these things. Because what I define in my mind and how the KPA actually defines it can be different, especially if you're not validating them on a regular basis. And this isn't an everyday conversation for you. Those things can get rusty in our mind, and that's just natural. But if we have a refreshed, do we have the right frame of mind when we're having a conversation with that candidate, we'll understand it at a higher level, and it makes for a smoother process.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I think one of the fun things about the KPA, when you do the full report, people get to the end of the validation, and how many times, I mean, it must be like 9 times out of 10, they say to you, wow, I can't believe that. How did you get there from the questions you asked? This is so me. It's very, it happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
Don't you find that,
All
Melanie?
the time. All the time.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel very, they like, wow, you really do have a good tool here. And that's one of the reasons why I love the fact that when you make yourself part of a process and you go through that with them, it sort of elevates Keller Williams and their hiring process. It puts us on a little bit of a pedestal, because many times when we're interviewing people, they've had lots of other jobs, but they've never been through a process like we have. And it's part of our culture, right? It's part of who you are. Melanie, you've been with Keller Williams probably longer than me. Not many people have, but
no, darling, you got me beat 18 years.
I've got you beat. Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm 18 years too, Melanie.
Yeah, well, I got you. I've definitely got you all beat. But I remember at the very beginning when we started, before it was I got on board with teaching and part of the process when it was Recruit Select and the AVA. But prior to that, we had another Get the Book system. But it didn't matter what the various different tools were. We always have had a process for carefully bringing people into our world. And the thing I love the most about it is that it's a two-way street. It gives them so much the opportunity to get to know us, like when we do things like the defense and you get to meet the whole team. I mean, those are steps that it's so sad if you miss out on those steps, because, you know, you're not just shortchanging yourself, but you're saying you're cutting a value that we have into pieces. So if there's anything that you get out of these sessions, it really should be follow that process. Make it real. Do it the way that it's this very special Keller Williams thing that we have, a value, part of our value proposition. So,
You know,
Marian, that kind of sparks me onto something, and I want to ask you guys this question. So you said, don't shortchange the process, don't cut corners. And what we know is that we get busy, it happens, we cut corners, we shortchange a process, we don't do the whole thing for one reason or another. What would we say to somebody who's on here today who goes, ooh, I have team members who I haven't KPA'd yet. I've got people I never took through the process.
Yeah, exactly.
How do we now restart? What's best practices for restarting that process with people we already have in our world? What would you guys say on that? How do we do it?
I said that a couple weeks ago.
I think that this is the fantastic time to do it. If you're listening today and you're thinking just that, well, heck, it's the end of the year. It's a new year. So for the new year, we're going to have a little consulting session. And look, we're going to use this tool because some of us didn't have the opportunity when we started, or we were busy then and now we need to go back and do it. This is a wonderful time to do that. And I think team members that are actually part of Keller Williams that see this there, they appreciate it even more than somebody who's coming in and thinking, well, this company's really weird that they keep having me coming back.
Why do I have to know who I am to sell real estate?
And I mean, you know, do you want me or not? I mean, this is like, yeah. So our own people appreciate it very, very much. It's special for them too.
This comes up all the time, Liz. This comes up all the times when I'm teaching. And, you know, I say that you're either going to decide one of two things probably today. One is you have the wrong person on the wrong seat on your bus, and that's okay too. And the other is I didn't do any of this and I have an amazing person on my bus and I got there without it.
Got really lucky.
I got really lucky. Exactly. I got really lucky. And I'm like, great. Now's the opportunity that you can go back. It's never too late to start the career visioning process. You could be business with somebody 20 years and you have never done this, go back and do it. Because what's going to happen, again, the big daddy, the bigger packet that has that whole KPA, that has all these steps that Marian just defense, it has group interview, it has report, all the things, right? That's in that KPA. So the KPA is not a one and done thing. So it is always a great time to go back to any piece of that. You know, to any part of that. In fact, I was talking to a team leader the other night who was having some challenges with a staff member. And I said, let's look at her KPA, you know, pull out her KPA. I said, sounds like you need that expectation dialogue again. And just going back. And he's like, I have to do the whole thing up. I said, no, I'm just talking. You've done the KPA. You've got that. Reread it. And then go back to a conversation on expectation dialogue. Yep. How do you win with you? There are so many pieces in there from that KPA, the entire one, right? That process that Marian just said. There's so many pieces that you can take back and win with your people. But like Marian said, hey, it's a new year, or it's just, I want to take our relationship to a whole new level. I just learned about this. I'm so excited to implement this so I can really know you and support you, because the best part of that whole process, in my opinion, is the life story, motivational future, right? And I know all the trainers would agree. Because the magic happens there. Because one is they're telling you who they are after you've done the KPA verification part, and now where they want to go. And where they want to go can change. So if you're working with somebody over time, that might change what matters to them. And when you are the facilitator of people's greatness, whether you're a leader of a market center or a leader of a team, that is our duty to help make sure that we can align our people and help them see what's even possible. But that comes all through that career visioning process. It's all part of that KPA.
Well, and that's why, to go back to the two reports again, right? John said, if you're looking to get to know somebody, personal report. If you're looking to hire somebody or be in business with somebody, job fit. And Brian asked in the chat here, one of our viewers today, about one of our thinking traits, which is spatial visualization, right? So here's one of the things for me. One, I'm not recruiting to a market center or anything like that. I like the personal report for that, particularly in roles of getting to know somebody. If I'm getting to know somebody, though, it's generally because I'm going to be in some kind of a more intimate relationship with them. I might not be hiring them, but I'm going to be in some kind more of an intimate business relationship with them. So because the personal report doesn't have those thinking traits, like you mentioned, Brian, I'm pretty adamant on I want the job fit report. And I'm going to ask somebody for that 50-minute commitment. That might be selfish of me, Melanie, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask them for that 50-minute commitment on there. And so what Brian asked on here was spatial visualization. And it says he's validating a KPA for his EA, and it has kept coming up as low on spatial visualization. So understand first, Brian, that is a thinking trait. And so that talks about the way that their brain works, the way they problem solve, the way they approach thinking at things. Spatial visualization is the ability to really picture things in that three-dimensional in their mind. I look at it like this. If I give this person a old school watch and I pull the back of it off, are they going to understand and just be able to look at it and go, oh, I get how all of these pieces intertwine together and work together? Because there is a trickle down effect when something goes wrong in our business or when something goes right. And so that spatial visualization, if it's high, gives them the ability to, in their brain, understand what might be some of the cause and effect here. We're not engineers. They're not building cabinets or houses or bridges. And I understand that it's super weirdly worded in the KPA, that it's, tactical, likes to play with their hands, can, engineers. No. We're not that.
Technology.
How does it apply in our world? They understand a lot of the cause and effect of something happening and what that might trigger, that A led to B, led to C, led to D. They can immediately go, yep, I know everything that this is going to affect if I do Y. If I do Y, it's going to have this cause and effect elsewhere in my business, because they see the world in that 3D. They understand how things work together. So hopefully it helps on that.
Don't you think it's in all of you trainers? Don't you think that one's kind of like, because that's always the one. That
and vocabulary gets
hundreds this comes up. I'm not like that. And I said, well, let's look at it this way. Are you strategic? If something comes up, are you able to find creative ways or whatever? Maybe creative is not the right word, but I see a little bit of correlation, like you just said with the watch. It's kind of strategy, like putting it together. Like, yeah, I'm really good at that. I'm like, oh, exactly. And everybody that I've asked that to that doesn't agree with that, agrees with that. So that's just a Melanie interpretation that is not Keller Williams verified, but that's the way that I kind of interpret that one when I've been teaching and verifying.
When you put it in the role, I mean, let's think of it for Brian here in the role of an EA. I want somebody who is going to not just look at fixing something in that moment, but what impact is that going to have? Let's try and think of an example in an agent's world. Maybe that person would, let's say you have a contract. Let's say you've received multiple offers on a property, and your EA is left there on their own, and they've got to solve it. Somebody might say, well, I'm just going to take the highest offer, the highest monetary offer. But does that person stop and think, okay, well, what's the best for my client? Do they have all of the pieces? Do they look and see, well, if I put this offer in first, or I recommend, I'm going to show all the offers because I'm required to do that. But if I go in saying that I'm recommending offer A, is that going to be the really best thing for my client? Am I thinking about how long they have possession in the property? Am I looking at what the financing is behind this? Do I see the whole picture, or am I just a single focused person who goes, oh, this is what we do A? Do I check things off on a checklist, or am I able to see consequences? It's that bigger picture look.
I always think of it, right? When people ask me about spatial visualization, I'm like, have you ever seen Iron Man? And so if you've seen Iron Man, you're probably going to know the scene that I'm going to talk about. There's a scene in Iron Man where he's in his little Iron Man workshop, basement, I don't know, whatever you call it, office. And he has a 3D image of, right, like a holographic image of his suit. And something's not working in it. And so he goes like this, and the suit all of a sudden is kind of floating all around him in these holographic 3D images. And he can see all the parts together. Somebody with really high spatial visualization, that's how they think about problems, just like what Marian said, right? They don't just see this is the highest price on a contract. They see the terms, the conditions, all the other offers. They think in a very dynamic and generally visualized way in their brain.
I love
so we
that.
got one more question, and then we're going to wrap. We're down to our last
Love
few
that.
minutes. Yeah. All right. So Ron asked this question in our chat here. He said, any tips for when you are asking questions on the traits and the person can't come up with good answers, or they're doing the shortest answers possible? Let's round robin this one. And John, we'll start with you. What would your response to that be? What's the best practice on that?
I think the big thing is getting really good at asking questions yourself, because there are several questions in there or in the report to help you dig a little bit deeper. And that's the thing is that we owe it to the person to not let them get off the hook by answering something short. So I think couple things. One, we have to make sure that they understand the actual question that's being asked itself, because sometimes people interpret things in a different way. So we need to really, I think, clarify ourselves what we're really asking to them, with them, and make sure that they understand it. Because sometimes when somebody is being a little bit short, I'll bring up the fact that, well, hey, that's not exactly what I was asking. Here's what I was trying to ask, and then maybe give a specific example on that. And then I think the other thing, and it's kind of like the same thing that when you go through MAPS coaches training, you have to get really good. They make you ask or come up with lots and lots of questions that you can ask people. And so I think that in the sense of, if we're not getting what we want out of them, we're probably not asking the right questions in the right way that they can understand. So I think that would be my biggest advice there is, hey, after doing a lot of these, what are the questions? How could I rephrase that differently? How could I ask something a little bit different? If they're struggling in giving me an example of how that shows up in their world, turn it to the personal, right? And sometimes we get a little bit weird about asking people really personal questions, and I'll always preface it that, hey, this doesn't need to be some deep personal thing that you don't want to discuss, but show me how this maybe shows up in your dynamics with your friends or with your family members. That way, if they don't have a specific work example, they can tap into how that shows up in their personal lives as well too. So I think it's one, knowing what questions to ask and coming up and practicing good questions to ask. So every week, and I still do this, is what questions could I ask? And I write another list of 50 different questions that I can ask in a different way, and then giving them opportunities to answer those in a variety of different areas of their life, not just work related.
That's awesome. The caliber of question we ask will determine the caliber of the response we get.
Everything.
Right? As John said, as coaches, we have to practice good questions, because when we ask good questions, we get good responses, because a thought-provoking, powerful question will get a better response. So while the KPA, to his point, gives you some to start with, look for your own that are relative to you as well. Melanie?
And go in that direction.
And then we'll wrap with Marian.
Yeah, so just, you think about that, like that's why we say practice on people like get comfortable. First of all, if you're going to be doing these, like practice with people already, that you're already comfortable with, because you as a facilitator of this is everything. Like I don't mean to put a lot of pressure on you, but I'm telling you, it's your magic secret superpower when you get good at asking questions, whether it's on the KPA or anything in your life. Because I'm really good at asking questions, and I'm really known, and all of us in here, for pulling out things in people, because that's where the gift is. When you can really have people open up to you and kind of share and say, well, let's look at it this way. What if it was? Well, I'm not. Well, what if you were? And you ask the questions. Now, to piggyback on that, if I'm in a situation and I know that I'm good at asking the right kind of questions, and and they're not giving me something, that tells me something else too.
Yeah, that tells you something too.
That tells me a lot. It's what in the they're not telling me is a big red flag for me. A big red flag. So that's why you really want to get, practice asking us with people you know, because when you can really master that, you can put this in listing, this goes in everything in your life. And it's sometimes when you are good at that and you're not getting the answers, well, right away they're holding something back, and you could even go there. Is there anything you're holding back that's making you comfortable having a really open, transparent conversation with me today? Like that's where I go with people, and you can take them there. But the KPA, so those probing questions, if you're missing those are some great questions. And like I love that John said, if you have powerful ones you want to add to that, but you keep it relevant. You don't just follow the thing. You're like, say, oh well, these questions are at the bottom. Well, guess what? That you don't need to go on that one, but the next one, that question, that one of the few that are on there, go there and go deeper on that, and go deeper and tell me more. And what about that? And where else does that show up in your life? I mean, go there, right? And they're going to tell you who they are. So that's why that whole like the verification process, it's a gift in people's lives. They're telling you, they're inviting you into their world and telling you who they are. But the questions are everything. If you can't get answers, that's telling you something.
Yeah, that's something in itself.
That's an answer too.
Last but not least.
Well, I agree absolutely with that. If they're not sorry, if they're not willing to tell you or to answer the questions, that certainly it definitely is a red flag. But sometimes when, I think Brian's probably hit one of those moments where he's asked it every which way that he can come up with in that moment, and he's just not getting anywhere. When that does happen, I think that, you can be very honest and say, well, I need to write something down. Let's think about something like this is me and you together are going to fill this out. And then you'll probably get something. But what I like to do in that is I keep a real note of that. I'm in my own notes. I have highlighted that. And as I go on through the questions, when they say something, they're going to say something that you can relate back to that question. I go right back there. And then I say, oh, you know what? It's like in that other question that we didn't quite, and they'll say, hey, let's go back and fill that out now. So whatever you need to do to get those questions answered, because at the end of it, when they've gone and all you've got is that piece of paper in your notes, you've got to make a decision based on that. So, Mark Willis told me once, he said, you know why I write everything down? Not because I can't remember it. This was when I was younger and I didn't think I needed to take notes. Those days are long gone, right? But he said to me, I write everything down because it slows me down. Mark, if you know Mark at all, he's like, everything's, and he said, it slows me down. And because of that, I'm able to really get to know the person in front of me. So I would say to you, don't let them off the hook. Think of get little pieces of, you mightn't feel like they've done justice to that question. So take what you can get and go on, but always go back. They'll say something that if you keep that in your head, in the front of your head, front of your mind, as they go through the questions, there'll be something they say that will allow you to connect it back. And in that moment, they're going to be like, oh, okay. It changes their demeanor. They realize that. And on the other side of it, if you go through a complete KPA and you really haven't got them to talk about who they are, you've just answered a few questions with yes, no answers, and no, that's not me, or you've wasted all of your time because you haven't fulfilled the process. So don't let them do that. They're here today to get answers to their profile and for you to see how they're going to fit in with the culture and the job requirements of the job. So don't let them off the hook, and don't let yourself off the hook. Do a good job.
I love that. Don't shortchange the process, right? If they're not giving us the answers, right? Dig deeper, dig deeper, dig deeper. Yes, you'll have a stopping point, but keep digging deeper. So I want to thank you all for staying with us 7 extra minutes. I know everyone's got to run off to appointments. Thank you, John, Melanie, Marian, for joining us as always for a wonderful CV and caffeine. I hope everyone's got their full caffeine intake needed for the day. Have a fantastic holiday. We will see you all in 2025 for our next CV and caffeine. Have a great day.
Right.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.